welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and we are ready to dive into the solo play for Primal: The Awakening from Reggie Games. This is landing on Kickstarter for January the 19th, and if you haven't checked out my unboxing of the Kickstarter components, or my setup video, which will help you have a better understanding of how all of this got to the table, I definitely recommend that you check out the link in the top right hand corner right now. That will take you to those two previous videos. You can check them out and then come back here and you'll be all caught up. So what are we covering in this video? Well, of course, we're gonna go through a full gameplay, but first, just before we dive into the first round, I wanna talk about the three major areas that you're gonna see on this table. We've got, of course, our hunter boards left and right. We've got the main board where actually the combat will be occurring, and then the top right we have the monster board. We'll talk about all of those areas quickly at a very high level, and then we're going to dive into the gameplay and everything will begin to click. So let's talk quickly about the game board. Of course, we have our two hunters here in the front section in front of the giant monster we're going up against, and that's all based on the setup for this prologue. In other battles against different monsters, you may be set in different locations or even potentially the same monster at a higher level. And you've got yourself some environmental tokens that go around here. So in this case, we have some brush here. We also have some other plants along the backside. The brush, basically, if you're in that section or sector as they call them, if you happen to move into here and you want to move into the brush, you can, and that will allow you to essentially remain hidden until the next time around. When your turn comes up, you can pop back out again. It kind of keeps you hidden from anything nasty that may happen, so it's a nice strategic thing to play with. You've also got this plant over here on the right that will allow you, when you're placing an attack card down in your sequence to do an attack, to actually deal additional damage by one, which is pretty handy. And if you start your turn in this sector back here with this plant, you actually gain or heal one. So all of those have some nice advantages when you're fighting the monster. The aggro token right now is up against this hunter right here. That is Darian, and we've got Myra on the other side. I've arbitrarily chosen to have Darian take the aggro token first, and that means he will be the first player. And on the far right hand side of the game board, we've got the round track, and we'll be starting in round number 1, so I've already moved it to that position, and this battle will commence over a series of 10 rounds. Now let's go over the character boards. So the first one here is Darian. He is a master with the Great Sword, and it's worth mentioning he has a mastery card, and this is something that will specify not only the title of what you have to do, multiple attacks, but it'll tell you down below with the iconography we need to play 2 red cards in a row back to back in our sequence, and then we can place a counter on this card. Once we place 2 of them, as it says right up top, then we're able to flip this card over, take advantage of whatever benefits on the other side. I'll certainly be trying to pull that off. Now on the left hand side of things, we've got typical equipment for you to expect a warrior: giant sword, basic helm, basic armor, everything you'd start at the very beginning in a prologue, right? Nothing too high level. Everything's level 1 right now. What really matters with this stuff is the ability on the sword itself, the damage that this sword actually does. When you typically do damage by playing red cards into your sequence, you're going to times your damage level of the weapon against the level of the weapon to give you how much damage you're going to pull off. And then of course you may have bonuses to that as well, so that's worth mentioning. You've got numbers down the left hand side of this card over here. They all say 6. I know they're quite hard to see in the shot, but essentially that is the makeup of your deck. And so as you can see, the makeup of your deck is going to change as you change weapons, as you change your character throughout the campaign. Down here at the very bottom, we currently have a potion in one of the potion slots. We can consume this potion if we're in the same sector, which is one of the 4 quadrants, which is on the game board that we just took a look at. Or if we're just healing ourselves, well, we can just heal ourselves for 2. And if we happen to have in the attrition discard pile, which I'll show you later on, if it happens to be a 1, then we're able to heal for 4. So we'll be trying to figure out when the best time to use this potion is, but the latter rather than the former is probably what we're going to be aiming for. Let's take a closer look at Darien here and a couple of numbers on the cards that are important to note around the health of your character. This is something you definitely don't want to miss. So 5 and 3 right here on the basic helm and basic armor, you add these together to get your total HP. This is the total number, in this case 8, that you do not want to hit with damage tokens on your character, as you will become KO'd. We'll go over everything involving KO if it happens during the playthrough. If it doesn't happen, I'll put that information on screen for you near the end so you can reference it, but we'll leave that alone for now to not muddy the waters. And if we come over here to our other hunter, Myra, she's really good with the great bow. And again, similar to Darien, there is an ability worth checking out at the very bottom left-hand corner of the actual weapon itself. But you also notice the damage here is only 2 versus the 3 for that melee weapon, the greatsword that Darien had. So there's differences there. So her basic attack is going to be a 2 times 1 for her level, and that's going to give her a 2 damage unless she has bonuses or additions to that. And you can see health levels exactly the same at 8, and also has the same potion. In the very far back there, you'll see the mastery for Myra is called Burst, and basically, once we've gone ahead and burnt through our entire deck for Myra, then we're going to go ahead and be flipping this card over and revealing it. What you're seeing here is everything to do with the AI, or the reactive behavior behind the monster you're fighting, which is extremely cool. So you can see down the very center of this, we've got 3 cards in position, all with icons on them. Basically, if we play a card into our sequence and it matches one of those icons, we're going to be flipping it over. Some of those icons will not be cards from our hand and will actually just be triggers based on whether or not we're actually resolving other behaviors, like this one here. Or you might see one that shows up like a tail, which means if we happen to start our turn at the back section of the monster. Or you may see something completely different, like the end of a round something triggers. There's all kinds of different behavioral reactions that the monster's going to do as we try to fight it. So those 3 cards will constantly be being flipped. You're going to be trying to avoid this as much as possible, but sometimes it is hard to avoid, but you can strategize around them. Every time one is used, one is replaced, and you always get to see what's coming up next because it's on the top of the deck, at least one of them anyway. In the very top right-hand corner, that mini card deck up there is the attrition deck. That was the deck I was telling you earlier. At the end of a hunter's turn, we flip that over and we determine whether or not I have enough defense for that hunter to avoid taking some attrition damage, which comes from the bottom of this card down here. That card is known as the stance card. Stance card also gives you information in terms of whether you can attack the monster from the front or the back. The little line there at the very bottom depicts the front of the monster, and as we know from the setup, the monster is facing the camera, so this would be the front and this would be the back. Those are vulnerable, and the sides right now are not. Now, as you can see on the stance card itself, it does have a Roman numeral in the top right-hand corner. It shows 1, which does tie itself to the different phases we're going to be running through with this monster as we try to take it down. So for every phase we run through in terms of how much damage we put on it, these cards are going to be removed, and cards underneath of them will then trigger and start from there. So things are going to get progressively more fun as we go along. These are considered peril cards right here in the middle. They tie themselves with the same Roman numeral, and they usually just come in with a bunch of other wonderful things that are going to try and hurt you. And then of course on the far right hand side you have what's called an objective card. This is actually something that could potentially be good for you if you can pull this off. We'll be making note of both of those as we go through the playthrough. The only other things to make mention of is at the very top here for the monster, it tells you what type of things you can expect to come from this monster. So fire is going to be something this monster loves. On the far right hand side, it's just the icon that actually matches the back of the behavior cards, and the rest of the cards you know which ones to set up. Now, getting in a little bit closer here on the peril card, you can see here we've got Dreadful Jaws. It says when a behavior card is triggered, players in the front sector, which means literally right in the front of the monster, are going to reveal a yellow card from their hand. If they have one, they're fine. If they don't, they suffer a damage. So that's something we just have to remember every single time one of these behavior cards on the monster board happens to flip over. Again, you'll see this during gameplay. On the right-hand side, that objective card I talked about states, when a player plays a red card attacking from the rear section, place a counter on this card. And then again, it's got a reaction ability on there as well. So this is something we'll actually want to do. We want to hit this thing a couple times from that back section. And if we can pull that off, we may gain a benefit there that'll really help us out. All right, so that's going to be the gist of the overview in terms of the areas that you have to understand, at least at a basic level, in order to dive into this playthrough. So from this point forward, we're going to start going ahead and drawing up our cards for each of our hunters. Each of our hunters draws up 5 cards apiece, and then we're going to be going ahead with the monster phase. Here's my opening hand for Darian with the Greatsword. It's worth noting when you get your first 5 cards, you are allowed to mulligan if you don't like what you see here, but I'm going to go over really quickly what exactly is going on with all the numbers and icons on these cards. We'll talk about how they're placed in a sequence and actually used when we go through round number 1. Here's the high level gist of things. In the bottom left hand corner, we have what is depicted as stamina. So basically, if we discard one of these cards from our hand, then we gain that much in stamina. You use stamina in order to pay for the cost of a card you want to play in the top left hand corner. Now we happen to have all 1s here, but there are other costing cards out there for higher amounts of stamina. So if I wanted to play Balanced Strike, for instance, for 1, I discard 1 card that happens to have, well, all of them do. I just pick one that I don't want and I discard this one, and just like that, I've paid the cost. This would be the first card in my sequence. These would still be in my hand. So that's the gist of how you're going to play stamina. You can also gain stamina by ensuring you keep at least 2 cards in your hand at the end of your turn, or more. You'll gain a token, which means you can kind of save up a bunch of stamina and then just unload and go crazy, which is pretty cool. Now, the number in the bottom right of each of these cards for this prologue, and especially when you're starting the campaign, should be 1. And that just lets you know you've got level 1 cards in your deck. There shouldn't be anything else. There also shouldn't be any wounds in your deck when you start. In the top right-hand corner of each of the cards is an aggro token icon. There's 2 different shadings to it. You're either going to see gray or you're going to see red. So red along the bottom, for instance, these top 3 have gray. So basically, if I pay the cost of 1 stamina, as I mentioned, and place a card into my sequence like so, so say I place this and I discarded this card, as I mentioned earlier, in order to pay for it, then you can see up here in the top right-hand corner, it's gray, so there'll be no aggro change whatsoever. In other words, if I had the aggro token, I still keep it. If I didn't have it, I don't get it. However, if I went ahead and decided to go ahead and discard a card in order to play one in my sequence that actually has red filled in, then I would, after resolving the card, go ahead and take the aggro token and place that next to my character. Again, if I didn't have the aggro token already next to that character. Now let's talk about the action cards in terms of how they're defined. So first off, we have offensive cards, which comprise of attack cards in red or maneuver cards in blue. So a red card, when played, of course, it needs to have its stamina cost paid for first, but once it's played on the table in your sequence, then that red card is going to trigger an attack right away, and that attack is going to be the level times by the damage that we talked about earlier on the character board, right? So for the Greatsword we saw in Darian, it was level 1, damage 3, so that's 3 damage. The second you place this card down, you're resolving its effects. The blue card over here is a little bit different. It is offensive, but in a different way. You're maneuvering. So you're not attacking, you're maneuvering, and what's happening is during the game, there's these struggle tokens that are going to show up on the monster board. They're going to accumulate over time. If you let them get out of control, they're going to trigger nasty effects on you. If you let them accumulate even in a small amount, they potentially can still trigger on you. When behavior cards are flipped over, they can become even more nasty. So how do you get rid of those struggle tokens? You play maneuvers, and when you play them down, you can remove one of the struggle tokens for each blue card that hits the table. And last but not least are the defensive cards. You have parry cards and dodge cards. At the end of the day, each of them are going to be useful in defending against what's known as the attrition damage or attrition check stage at the end of your turn. So when you're done your character's turn and your sequence is complete, your cards have been played, you're hoping that you've put at least a couple of these types of cards down on the table and paid for, so that when you flip over a card from that mini card deck we saw earlier called the attrition deck, that the number that comes up is equal to or lower than the number of defensive cards you have on the table. If you don't, then unfortunately you'll be taking the attrition damage, which is shown right here on the stance cards. Now, as an example, let's say hypothetically I actually had these 3 cards in a sequence on the table just like this. I'm not caring necessarily about any of the abilities in the midsection whatsoever, or the fact that I needed to actually pay for these. This is just an example of what an end of sequence could look like at the end of your character's turn. So I've got 3 defensive cards here. We know the attrition hit's potentially going to be 1. We go to the mini card deck, which has a back like this. We flip it over. We see it's a 1 this time. Because I have 3 cards for defense and this is only a 1, we are beyond safe and don't take any damage here. If this happened to be a 4, we'd be taking attrition damage equal to whatever this value is, plus any additional bonuses that might be applied from the AI of the monster as well. However, in this prototype, the attrition deck goes from 1 to 3. I've gone ahead now and drawn 5 cards for Myra, so both of our characters now have a full set of 5 cards each. The only thing on the cards we didn't talk about yet is what's going on in the very center of them. That's very important, and you'll be using this to your advantage strategically when you place out your sequence and to take advantage of abilities as they're played. So that will be talked about as we go through round number 1 and we use them. It'll make a lot more sense there. The final thing we need to ensure, or at least keep high level in our minds, is that every card that is played in the sequence is then double checked against the behavior cards on the AI's monster board to ensure a behavior of the AI doesn't trigger. I've gone ahead and drawn up the cards for Myra, so now she has 5 cards in hand just like Darian. We're ready to roll. The only thing we didn't talk about was the major things happening in the middle of the cards here, but that'll make a lot more sense as we actually play them and you see the first round pan out and going onwards. We also want to remember the correlation of whatever cards are played down for a sequence. We always have to check the behavior cards, the 3 of them sitting on the monster board we saw earlier, to see if any of these color symbols show up in there, because after resolving that particular card in the sequence, we will then trigger a reactive behavior from the AI, which will be quite interesting. With the overview out of the way and our 2 hunters completely set up with 5 cards apiece, the round track is currently set on 1. Now we're going to move to the monster phase starting round number 1, and we begin with struggle tokens being placed on our monster. So it depends on how many characters are being controlled. In this solo playthrough, we are required to use 2 hunters, so 1 struggle token per each character or hunter is being placed on the boss just like this. It's worth noting, as I talked about before, that this boss could use small amounts of struggle tokens on those behavior cards to make our lives more painful. They'll also even use those struggle tokens in situations where it doesn't even benefit them. So there is kind of a potential that we might get away with some situations where we should have gotten hit. There'll be times where we actually do get hit, and worst case scenario is if we get a full 10 struggle tokens on this monster, then the monster is going to discard them all and deal attrition damage, and that's going to cause us problems as well. So, long story short, let's try to mitigate that with blue cards and other game mechanics. The next thing we would normally do, if this wasn't the first round of the game, is we would go ahead and take a look in the bottom left-hand corner of each of the behavior cards. You'll see a number. The lowest number behavior card is the one that gets discarded and replaced by the card on top of the deck over there of behavior cards. However, like I said, for the first round, we skip this. So we jump over to Darian, and why do we start with Darian? Because Darian has the aggro token, which is also known as the first player token for a given round. So Darian, what do you want to do? Well, the first phase we go through is movement. Do we want to move? Currently, we're actually sitting based on the stance card in the front position of the monster, which is where we could inflict damage. That's a good thing. The downside of sitting still, though, for a turn and not moving whatsoever during that turn is you're going to gain what is called a threat or threaten token. This token right here, and it will sit on your game board, and when you do your attrition check at the end of your turn, instead of drawing just one of those mini cards and seeing the number up against your defense, you're going to draw 2 of them and take the worst of the 2. In other words, the higher of the 2. That can really hurt, but there'll be situations, like even right now, where it'll be extremely tempting to sit still and just hammer away at this giant monster. I've decided to discard a card during the movement step of my character's turn in order to move from this sector to this sector right here. You can only move to adjacent ones, so I only have the option of this one here or this one over here. I also have the option when I move into here to potentially go into the brush. So I literally could go into here if I wanted to, but I don't have any reason to do so, but I'll explain to you what the benefit of that is. Essentially, if I start my turn there or I move into that sector with a brush like I just did, I can choose to go into the brush, and when I do, my turn immediately stops. I go to the other character's turn, resolve the whole thing, and then come back to my turn. This might have some strategic advantages and likely will, depending on what the monster is doing on the game board and the current state of the environment in the 4 sectors. Here is what I currently have left in my hand, and to be honest, these are the 2 cards I'm trying to hold on to. I don't necessarily want to do them right now because remember, if I happen to play a red card in my sequence, as of the current state of the behavior cards, literally every single one of them will trigger. It's pretty nasty, so when I'm ready to attack with red, I really need to be sure it's worth the pain coming my way and also that I'm in a good position. So what I'm trying to do is get my characters as far apart from each other as possible so whatever nasty comes at us doesn't affect both of us at the same time. So long story short, I'll keep these 2 cards in my hand. This will also guarantee if I keep 2 or more cards in my hand, I get a stamina token, which will help me with spending cards later on. These 2, however, I'm tempted to use, but the only one I really should use is the one for defense, just so when I make my attrition check that I have something there to potentially block against the chance of taking damage. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this card, discarding it for its stamina of 1. And there are cards that you will get that will have stamina of 2, and I imagine in higher level decks those will go beyond as well. Discarding that card pays for this card. This is the first one that sits in the sequence, and first thing you do when you place it here is check to make sure that because you've placed a green card, no monster behavior has triggered, and it hasn't. We have 2 reds and another nasty one in there that only triggers if another AI behavior triggers. So we're good there. Then we take a look at the center here, and it states draw 1, but you'll see a tiny little arrow there. It's really hard to see, and then a blue icon. So what that basically is saying is if I wanted to, which I can't, if I had a blue card in my hand, I could pay for it and place it to the right when I'm building up my sequence, I would also gain this effect. This is where the card play becomes extremely awesome in this game. Darian's sequence section of his turn is complete. We've now done movement and sequence. We're now going to go to attrition damage. We're going to pull 1 card off the top. It would be 2 if I had stayed in the same place with him, but I didn't. And we got ourselves a 1. So because we do have the 1 defense there, nothing bad in terms of attrition damage is going to come our way. And now we move to our end of turn, which is really the cleanup of the character's turn. So all of the sequence cards go in the discard. We only had 1, it goes here. We have 2 or more cards in our hand at the end of our turn, so we gain a stamina token. We can use this any time, or we can accumulate them over time to help us later on. At this point, we now refill our hand back up to 5, and we would discard down if we happen to have more than 5 cards at this particular point. So we're going to go all the way up to 5 like so. The monster is now going to face whoever has the aggro token at this point at the end of the turn. That is now complete, and we're going to move over to Myra's turn. What I'm thinking to do with Myra is move to the rear of this monster based on the stance card. As you can see over here, the front and the back are the vulnerable positions right now. So getting over there would be a good idea. Plus, I get the benefit of an extra damage off of this plant here. So in order to do that as part of my move during my turn, and also to avoid having a threat or threatened token placed on Myra, which I'd rather not have for the attrition check later on, I'll go ahead and discard this card right here, Accurate Shot. It has an assist ability on it. Assist, basically as a keyword, allows you to freely spend the card to assist another individual on their turn. So I might be using those cards in that fashion as we go through the playthrough, because it'll likely help us out. So let's go ahead and move Myra over to the back side of this monster. Here's a look at my cards currently in my hand, and honestly I've gone back and forth on a couple different options I could do here, but long story short, I want to hold on to Heavy Shot and wait for later to do this. I also want to get rid of some struggle tokens, but even better than that, I think I just want to draw a couple more cards. These are great cards. Cover Fire is fantastic. As a reaction, it has a keyword, which means when any ally suffers damage from attrition, you can discard this card to cover that, which is huge. But at the end of the day, I want to get a defense down. This is the only defensive card I have. I have to pull from this deck, and I want to have at least something there. So I'm going to have to pay 2, which unfortunately means I got to get rid of both of these 2 and hold on to my heavy shot for a bigger attack later on. So let's go ahead and ditch these 2, and we'll go ahead and draw 2 more cards and see how this pans out. So this one is now paid for. No aggro change whatsoever. It's in my sequence line. I'll move these down. We just got ourselves repositioning, which allows us to recycle 1. The next card you play this turn gains stealth. That's huge, and I'll talk about that later on. And quick shot. Now this is an awesome card to get. Repositioning is huge. If I use this on the next time around, keeping these 2 cards, and I play repositioning before I play heavy shot, I'll be able to pull off the ability to take this heavy shot with all that damage and not have it actually trigger any of the behaviors that are currently on the monster board, because the next card after this one would have stealth, which is awesome. I also just got this quick shot one here. It says when you discard quick shot from your hand, you gain volley 1, which is another awesome card. It literally doesn't cost anything to play this into the row, which will allow me to get a struggle token removed for free. That's nice, but this one says if I discard it, in other words, to gain a stamina, then I can gain the ability to use volley. Volley is really cool. Basically, you discard the number of cards next to the word volley, which in this case is 1 from the top of your deck, and for every one that comes up as a red card, you are going to be able to do that much damage, which is your damage level of your bow. So 2 in this case times the 1 level I have, so 2 damage for free out of nowhere, and that doesn't even trigger any of the red behavior cards on the monster. So long story short, I think I'm actually pretty good with where I'm currently at. I'm not actually going to discard that quick shot just yet. I'm going to hold on to all 3 of these cards in order to go in the next round. So I have 1 defense in my current sequence. We're going to go ahead and pull a card from the top of the deck here to see whether I have enough defense to deal with any. Yes, I do. I'm good. So it matches up. I have 1 on 1, so we're all okay. Now, again, there's only so many 1s in there. There's 2s and 3s too, so I'm sure they're on their way in the near future. Turn is done. I have 2+ cards in my hand, so I do gain a stamina token for Myra. At this point, we can refill our hand back up to 5. I'll go ahead and draw 2 more cards here. We got Catch the Eye with a quick assist, and we have Decoy. Choose a player to draw 1. At this point, if the aggro token had have changed positions and gone over to Myra, we would move the monster to face Myra, but the aggro token is still where it is, so no movement from the monster. So we are wrapping around to another monster phase. Of course, we need to go ahead and move the round down to 2, and we also place 2 more struggle tokens on the big boss. This is not good. Next up, we're going to go ahead and discard the lowest value behavior card from the row. Here we have a 5 and 2 4s, so out of the 2 4s, I'll discard 1 of them and replace it with a blue card from the deck. Behavior cards are all squared away. We got 3 of them on the board as always, and you can see we got advanced knowledge of the next one coming out. It's got the Jaws icon, which basically means if one of my hunters is standing in the front section where the head of the monster is, and that AI card happens to be on the monster board, which it isn't yet, but it will be in the future, then at the start of that hero's turn, it would be flipped over, and something nasty will likely occur. So those ones are pretty brutal. I'm going to get a bit risky here, and I'm going to keep Darian in the same sector that he's currently in so I can make an attack against the front of this monster, which is vulnerable, so I have to take this threatened token. First card I'll play for my sequence by paying my stamina token of 1. The cost right here is Reactive Guard. And so you can see here, if I happen to place a red card beside it next, I'll be able to take advantage of this. But as of right now, I've just got some defense, so I'm okay with that. We'll discard this stamina. Next card I'm going to put into play, I believe makes the most sense, but could be quite interesting based on the AI behavior, is going to be Balanced Strike. I need to pay 1 for this. So I'll discard this card from my hand for 1 stamina. Now, before the AI of the monster reacts, I get to fully resolve this card. So Balanced Strike right away is going to allow me, with Darian, to go ahead and use my sword, which is a damage of 3 times 1, which is a level, so that's 3 damage, in order to go against the monster, which is great. I'm in a vulnerable space. I can make this attack. I also, because I placed a red card beside the yellow one, and the arrow's pointing this way, so it's all in order, I deal an additional 2 times my weapon level, which is 1 additional damage. So instead of it just being the 3, it's going to be bumped up to a total of 5, which is pretty nice. 5 damage is going on the monster. We need a total of 18 to take it down in this very first phase. The last thing we need to do on the card before we resolve any AI behavior is we need to draw 1 card based on Balanced Strike. Thanks to Balanced Strike, as I mentioned, and the yellow card being to the left of it, I draw 1 card. So I'll go ahead and do that. We got ourselves Timed Slash. At this point, our turn is interrupted as we've gone ahead and played a red card. So you can see there is a red behavior card in the middle there on the monster board. So we're going to reveal this one and find out what happens. The card states Quick Aggression, Claw. The active player suffers 1 damage unless they have a yellow card in their sequence, and we do. These are the 2 cards currently in my sequence. I am the active player, so this will not be hurting me. However, now we can talk about the bottom section here, which relates to the struggle tokens with that same icon you see on those blue tokens. This AI monster has 4 right now, and it says it will go ahead and spend 1 in order to add an additional damage. You might think, hey, the AI wouldn't do it because the damage didn't get through. No, it still adds that struggle token. It bumps up the damage even though it doesn't actually inflict any on me, which is great. So for me, there is a big time benefit to getting rid of those tokens. So as you can see, the middle behavior has now been resolved and is out, and I've put a new one in here that came from the top of the deck, and we now have a green that's going to be coming in later on. But guess what? Something else was out there when we started to trigger AI behavior, and that's this one right here. This symbol specifies that when an AI behavior, another one, is triggered, this one is triggered as well. Flamethrower. It says Firestorm. Place a fire terrain in the front sector and then spend 2 struggle tokens, and players in the front sector discard a green card from their hand or suffer 1 fire damage. Well, that is certainly bad news for a number of reasons. First off, the fire token lands in my spot, and we'll talk about what fire does in terms of damage in a second. But what it does do is it affects brush. If there is brush in the sector where fire shows up, it burns it all up. The other thing worth noting is that it comes in on its red side and then will eventually, after a round, go to its orange side, and then it will go away. Unfortunately, it's going to be there for a bit, and the biggest downside to having a fire in your spot is you can't play any cards into your sequence because of the fire there. You can move, though, out of that area, but that area becomes essentially blocked off for the purposes of playing sequence cards to try to do anything against this monster. I also don't have any green cards in hand, only yellow, red, and blue, so I will be taking a damage. So that nasty card is gone. We've added a new card into the fray here that we knew was coming, which is the nasty one that is going to bite the individual standing right in front of the monster. And then we've got another one coming in later on for the back section of the monster. The other thing to note is we went through 2 behavior activations. Down here, it states on this card, when a behavior card is triggered, players in the front section reveal a yellow card from their hand or suffer 1 damage. Thankfully, for both of those triggers, I had a yellow card in my hand, so I'm not going to be taking any additional damage from that, but it's something to keep an eye on. So unfortunately, this AI behavior immediately stopped my plan of potentially doing another back-to-back attack, which would have been pretty awesome, although it would have potentially triggered some more behavior cards. But at the same time, this fire stops me from placing any cards in my sequence. So at this point in time, being that I can't move until the beginning of my turn, as that happens at the beginning and then the sequence, I'm stuck there right now. The other thing to make note of that's nasty about fire is when it's in your space, if the monster would ever place fire again in that space, 1 damage goes to each individual in that sector. So you don't really want to hang out in those areas. So as I mentioned, we are done our turn, so we're going to be doing the attrition damage now to see if we can handle this. We have 1 defense, we're hoping to see a 1. Oh my goodness, we got 3 in a row. That's amazing. Okay, I'm happy with that. But we did take the 1 damage from earlier on. I want to make sure you guys realize that that is on Darian's card. Cards are in the discard pile. I have more than 2 cards in my hand, so I do get a stamina token. And at this point, we get to refill our hand with 2 more cards. I've got double slash. That's going to be awesome. And taunt, very good. And just to also note, the cards that I played still ensured that the aggro token was still on Darian. But wait, I caught something. I had a threat token on Darian, which means I should have pulled 2 cards in this deck. So can we get another one? Oh my gosh, we got a 0. That's awesome. Okay, the threat token, just so you're aware, stays on the character that it was placed on until that character moves. So if I just continue to sit there, that is going to pump up the chance of this eventually hitting me. How it hasn't yet, still don't understand. Currently, this is the hand of cards that Myra has, and the AI behavior right now will trigger on a green card usage, blue card usage, or being in the front section at the start of my turn. So none of those right now are triggering, which is great. But if I play a green or a blue, they'll trigger. And the nasty thing is I have cards in here, like this green one would allow me to play the next card in sequence and gain its stealth, meaning it wouldn't trigger something. But if I play green to get this ability to make this be safe, the green still triggers. So it's kind of stumping my plans a little bit, which is why I love this AI system. You always think you have a strategy and you need to adjust it based on those behavior cards. So now that my strategy is changing, I'm going to actually decide to move. I was thinking about sitting still and taking a threatened token, but I'm just going to move. So I'm going to discard this card from my hand here, a quick assist, and we're going to move her just to this side right here. I'm going to go ahead and play this card into my sequence. I'm going to use my stamina here to pay the cost, this token that I have for Myra, and it's going to allow me to choose a player and draw 1 card. It also is going to have the aggro token move over to her, so I'll be moving that right now off screen. And also, we're going to go ahead and draw a card, and I'm going to choose Darian to actually take that card because I want to set him up for some serious hits. He pulled Evasive Step, so we'll add this to his hand of cards. Based on the behavior cards for the monster and the cards I have in hand, even though I would love to use Heavy Shot and could have if I had stayed in the sector behind the monster, I'm getting myself set up for what I know is going to be some movement now, as because I've taken the aggro token, the monster is going to, at the end of my turn, shuffle over and stare Myra down, giving his back wide open for Darian to come around the backside with additional cards and the extra stamina token he has to really hopefully lay into that monster pretty heavily in the next round. So what do we have for attrition damage? We've got 1 defense and we finally get hit. So we do take 1 damage going against Myra. Sequence discarded. We have 2+ cards, so we get a stamina token back, which is always nice. I love that. Gives you some extra ability to pay for more cards. We're also going to draw 2 more cards to get up to 5. We got ourselves Reload, which is a reaction card. We can use this to recycle cards in our hand, which is awesome. We haven't had to do that yet, but I likely will. Ooh, Perfected Stretch. This is an assist. At the start of your turn, if Perfected Stretch is on top of your discard pile, draw 2. The monster now is going to point its attention at the new carrier of the aggro token. And that's going to do it for the 2 characters for this round. At the end of round, if we have fire in play, which we do for the first time, it is now going to be reduced from the red side down to this orange and yellow side. And next time around, it will disappear completely. We now go into the next round, so we're in round number 3. We still have a lot of work to do, so we're really going to have to push to put some damage on because we're going into this 3rd round. We only have 5 damage on him so far. Not that great. We're also adding 2 more tokens to the pile over here. Some more struggle tokens, so up to 5. We can also need to use blue cards a lot in the next turn upcoming to try to reduce those tokens down. And we're going to discard the lowest numbered card in the behavior cards here, which is 1. For the green one will be discarded, and it will be replaced with that tail or back option over there. So if our characters or hunters start at the back of the monster or at the front of the monster on their turn, there's going to be a behavior card coming for them. And unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening here. We have Myra sitting in the front section of the monster, so immediately at the beginning of her turn, that behavior card is going to trigger. Now this one is pretty nasty. It's a frightful growl, and it says oh no, gaining 4 struggle tokens and gaining attrition damage +1 until the end of the round. So instead of it being the regular attrition damage of 1, it will now be 2. So we're really going to have to ensure we keep our defense up. 4 extra struggle tokens have been added to the monster. We have a total of 9. The rule states when the monster would gain struggle tokens, but it already has 10 or more, then it's going to use its unleash ability, and that's going to trigger. So basically, the next time we place struggle tokens on, we are able to place them on even if they go over 10, but the time after that, they will have 10 or more, and then it will trigger on us. I've replaced the behavior card in the row, and I've also placed the last behavior card we resolved on top of this card here where the attrition is mentioned, because I want that reminder that it's now at 2 until the end of the round. With the monster's behavior out of the way, we move to whether we want to actually move Myra around the board or not. And I'm going to choose to actually sit tight. So we're going to take a threatened token and we're going to place it on her board. The next thing we're going to do is play some cards into our sequence, and we're going to see whether or not we can avoid triggering any more nasty behavior cards. The first card I'm going to play is not going to go into my sequence, and the reason I'm doing this is because blue right now would actually trigger if I was to play this in my sequence. Instead, I'm going to use it and discard it into my discard pile in order to gain the 1 stamina to use to put another card into my sequence. But the great thing about Quick Shot is when you discard Quick Shot from your hand, gain Volley 1. So that's pretty awesome. So we are going to discard this. Volley 1 allows us to pull a card off the top of our deck, and if it happens to be a red card when we place it in the discard pile, we get to do our weapons damage times our level against the monster. So here's hoping we see a red card. At least I hope so. Here we go. No, it was green, and this card is going to go into the discard pile. I don't get to place it in my hand. That volley was unsuccessful. Volleys are quite fun, but they're risky. Now with the stamina that I got from that blue card by discarding it, I'm going to play this card here called Repositioning, the first one into my sequence. It's green, it doesn't trigger anything in the monster's AI, thankfully, and it only costs 1. It states I can go ahead and recycle a card, meaning I can discard a card from hand if I'd like to in order to draw another card up. I'll think about that, but the one below is what I'm really excited about. The next card you play in this turn gains Stealth, meaning we will not trigger any behavior cards with the next card we place in sequence. I won't be using the recycle 1 from this card, but I'm certainly paying 1 stamina and placing down this attack card to make an attack against the monster. You can see that I could use this for its cost of 1 to make this attack right now as a red card, or I could have kept this card in Myra's hand and used it as an assist on Darian's turn, and that would allow me to allow Darian to draw an extra card. It also would technically be free when I'm using it as an assist, so that's another reason to use assists separately outside of putting them in your sequence, because you're helping somebody else draw a card without even paying the stamina for it. And on top of it, this one has a benefit that actually applies no matter which way you use the card. If this is the last card on top of your discard, which it will be in my case as you put them back in your discard in the order of your sequence, then the next time around I'm going to get to draw up 2 extra cards. That was part of the plan. So here's where things get real fun. So I'm making an attack with my Great Bow. My Great Bow has this really cool ability right on the card. If I play a single red card, I can do a Volley 2, which is pretty awesome. Again, remember, it's just pulling 2 cards off the top, and for every red card, I'm doing additional damage. So let's go ahead and do that on top of what I'm doing with a regular attack. So this first attack, again, is in stealth. Doesn't matter that there's a red behavior card up there because it's in stealth. So I'm going to be doing 2 damage to the monster as of right now. We're going to draw some more cards to volley to see if this actually gets any worse for the monster. Nothing there, and we missed out on both of them, but still 2 damage going through. The damage has been added to the monster. We're up to a total of 7. There was an aggro red icon right here, but the aggro token is already with Myra, so we leave it as is. That's it for my sequence. I don't want to play any more cards. I know I don't have many defensive cards in there, and I'm threatened, so the downside is we're pulling 2 cards for the attrition. Things are likely to come back on us. There wasn't too much I could have done. The reason I could, and this is something I'm struggling with, I've got 2 cards here in hand. I could technically discard this heavy shot, which is really powerful level and allows you to pay an extra 3 stamina to put an additional 5 damage on your attack on top of your bow's damage, which would be a huge hit. The trade-off is if I pay that heavy shot in order to place this defense down, by pulling 2 cards in this deck, there is a chance I could actually see a 3, which would make the whole thing a wash anyway. So I'm going to actually just take the hits because I think the ability to place that much damage is going to be really useful, even if in the future it may trigger the behavior that's been sitting up here. But I know for a fact over here on Darien, I'll be doing some red cards anyway. So let's see how this attrition damage goes. 2 cards. We got a 1. That's good. So we're safe for now. Probably not safe with the second one. Nope. There it is. There's the hit. And unfortunately, instead of it just being 1 attrition damage, it's going to end up being 2. Everything has been discarded for Myra. We do have this awesome perfected stretch. I got to remember to draw those extra cards later on. We also gain a stamina because we had 2 or more cards in our hands, so we'll take that for sure. We'll go ahead now and refill our hand. 3 more cards coming our way. Oh, there's the red we needed. Wide opportunity. Well, this could set us up for some pretty awesome damage. Oh my goodness. Here's all the red cards coming out. Long shot. Is there another one? Oh my gosh. I promise you, I shuffled this deck. They all got clumped together there. That's amazing. That is amazing. So we got tons of red. That's going to be really tough to decide which red is going to do the most amount of pain. End of turn, the monster right now would go ahead and move towards whoever has the aggro token, still on Myra, so no change there. All right, this is going to be a really, really crazy turn. Lots of combinations here, and I actually mulled this over, trying to get the best bang for buck with the cards I have in Darien's hand, but we are going to be putting some big-time damage on this thing. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and discard this card from my hand in order to move Darien from here to the rear position. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and discard this card in order to get 1 stamina, and I'm going to go ahead and place this card as the first one in my sequence. This is called Evasive Step. It says search your deck for a red card and add it to your hand. This is the card that I've chosen to take. There were a couple other ones in the deck, but they were much higher cost. Unfortunately, I'm trying to get something that doesn't have too much of a stamina hit in order to play an attack, and I was aiming to get something that was 1 or lower, but we don't have any more in my main deck. Most of them have been used and are in my discard or currently in my hand. The next card I'm going to play is a pretty powerful one. It's called Guard of the Dragon. So we're going to place this one down like this. I'm going to pay for it with this stamina. We've also gone ahead and got ourselves 2 defensive cards, which is a plus, but this is a cool card. It states reduce the cost of the red cards you play this turn by 1. And that's literally every red card after it. So that is why I was digging through my cards, hoping to find one that only cost 1, because I was trying to pile up as many attacks as possible at this point. But it didn't pan out the way I wanted to. We'll just continue onwards. So next card I'm going to go ahead and play is going to be, and just so you're aware, neither of these 2 cards I placed have triggered any behavior yet. This one here can go into my row. It doesn't cost me anything thanks to this card right here. So this is 1 reduced down to 0, and it's a jumping slice. So it does state on here, if I had paid this with a blue card, I'd get additional damage. I had to weigh the benefits of whether I wanted to reduce the cost with what I had in my hand or play a blue card against that one in order to get additional damage, but I think I'm okay with the way it's going right now. So now we're up to a total of 10 damage. We need 18 to get past the first phase of this monster. So what we're going to do now is trigger this red card right here. Dragon Wrath is what we have coming at us right now. It says that this monster is going to immediately turn to the active player, so doing a full 180 from Myra to Darien, and it's worth noting I should have gone ahead and actually moved the aggro token as well. It doesn't make any effect on this, but you need to do that immediately. So I've moved the aggro token over. The monster's doing a 180 to face Darien, dropping fire on his space. Doesn't do any damage yet, but makes the rest of the cards in his sequence unusable, and I'll show you in a second why that is really, really bad for me and what I had planned. And then we're going to go ahead and the monster is going to spend a struggle token and try to activate some fire damage on Darien, but thankfully I have a green card in my sequence, so that won't trigger, but we still spend the struggle anyway. That was a brutal turn of events. I was really hoping to put down another attack, but it looks like this monster's got other plans in mind. The monster has turned, fire has been placed, and things are not looking good. I've also gone ahead off screen, replaced the behavior card that we just saw with the new one that was coming in next, and it's actually one that will trigger at the end of the round, which unfortunately is coming up right away. One thing we want to keep track of is the objective card. It states on it, when a player plays a red card attacking it from the rear section, which I did before it spun around on me, place a counter on this card. So I'll go ahead and place a counter here. If we get 2 of them on this card, we get a benefit. Now I want to talk to you about how painful the monsters behavior cards can be in terms of ruining your plans, which make this thing feel like a real opponent you're going up against. I had every plan in place to go ahead next and discard a card to gain an additional stamina, to then place this card that costs 2 into my row, doing more damage, because again, this card would drop the cost down by 1 on top of it, making 2 cards essentially a possibility for 1 more attack. This also would have allowed me to use my multiple attacks mastery card, placing a counter on this, which would have put me towards getting a mastery. And on top of all of this, I would have also been able to use my greatsword ability, which allows me to put additional damage on for using 2 reds in a row. I had a whole plan in place, and then the monster decided otherwise. Now, one thing I realized I missed is I should have removed my threatened token from Darian when he made his move out of the fire at the beginning of the turn, because as soon as you make a movement, if you have a threatened token on you, it is now gone. So that means I'm only pulling 1 card for my attrition check, and thankfully I have 2 here, so I'm doing okay, but I haven't seen many 3s, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's what comes up next. So here we go. Oh, it's a 1. We got lucky. Okay, so we're good. We don't take any additional attrition damage, which is good, because remember, it was a +1 on that, making it 2 for this round. Sequence has been discarded. I'm gaining a stamina because I have 2 or more cards in hand. Now I'm going to draw up to 5. Got ourselves Heavy Clash, Pressing Strike, and finally Thwart. We now check to see whether or not the aggro token moved positions and whether we need to move the monster to face it. No, we don't, because Darian still has the aggro token up here, so the monster's happy where it currently is. We now move into the end of round, where we're going to do things like drop the fire levels down, move the round marker, and all that good stuff. But before we do that, there's a behavior card in the row that triggers on the end of round before anything else within the end of round. So that is the hourglass in the middle. So the behavior of the monster is going to trigger right now. The card states Assault, Claw. Players in the front sector immediately move or they suffer 1 damage. Then it's going to turn to the player with the least amount of defense cards in hand. A struggle token will be spent and the requested movement must be paid with a double stamina card. Ouch. So instead of it being a card discarded that just has 1 stamina, it's got to be 2 this time around. It's for Darian, because Darian is in the front sector, so he's discarding that card, dropping him down to 4 cards. I've gone ahead and also discarded the struggle token, beefing that card up for that horrendous spend of 2 stamina. The other thing that's nasty is right now we need to replenish the behavior row. You'll see I have no more cards left. They're all in the discard pile. So when this happens and it's empty, we need to immediately reshuffle the behavior deck and form a new one, and then place 1 struggle token back on the monster. I've gone ahead and added 1 struggle token for the reset. We've got a green trigger in here now, along with a blue, and also if we have a player starting in the tail section, that will trigger. Currently right now, actually Myra is standing in there, so when her turn begins, which will be the 2nd character to go in the next round coming up, that is going to hurt us. Let's deal with the rest of the end of round effects. So fire is going to go away, especially if it's on the orange or yellow side, so see you later. This is going to flip over to the other side, becoming a little less brutal, but still a problem for playing sequence cards in the future. Also, as I mentioned earlier in the video, if this monster needs to place fire in a space that has fire, there's damage coming your way, so don't stay in there too long. We are now heading into the 4th round, and also 2 struggle tokens for the monster phase are going into the pile. That's going to put them at the 10 limit, which is a-okay. It's only when we need to place struggle tokens and we're at 10 or beyond that's all going to discard, and we're going to have some pain coming our way. We also don't want to forget about discarding this frightful growl right here that gave a +1 to attrition damage. This is no longer in effect as it goes away at the end of the round. That behavior card that gave a +1 to attrition that I just got rid of off of here is in the discard pile. In case you're wondering the timing of this, based on the rules, we were supposed to look for any hourglass symbols in the behavior row first, which is what caused the monster to trigger at the very beginning of the end of round phase. So we did that completely correct, and then we move into every other end of round effect and cleanup. So basically that card, unfortunately, is just outside of the window when the deck was replayed. replenished to build back the row, so it ends up in the discard pile. There may be further clarification as to the timing of this, but I'm going to err on the side of things being tougher rather than easier. So we're kicking off this round with Darian, and he does start in an area, even though it's consumed in fire, it has the plant there, and that plant doesn't get burnt up. It's only the brush that gets burnt up when a fire gets placed. But the plant is there, and that plant is going to allow Darian to heal one, so he's going to heal the only damage he has, which is quite nice. And now he is definitely going to discard a card to get out of there. Darian is going to go ahead and discard this card from hand. Remember, he's only got 4 cards this turn because of nasty effects that took a card from him that was a double stamina. This one's going to be discarded so I can move right now, and I'm going to move from my current location to this sector over here where that plant will give me an additional damage bonus. Now, the only other thing I'm going to go ahead and do, and I don't even know if this will actually help me at all because there's no way I can change the orientation of the monster at this point until the end of my turn, so I can't make the massive attack that I have lined up just now. It'll have to happen next round, but I could potentially play a card on the table in order to block attrition damage, but the fact that I only have 1, I'm likely going to fail this as I haven't seen many 3s and there's only a couple cards left, so I'm guaranteeing that they're coming down the pipes at me. So rather than spend that card, I'll hold on to it for later, and we're going to go, and also I don't really want to burn my stamina token to pay for it or get rid of 2 of the great attack cards that I have lined up for a combo attack later on. So long story short, we're going to end my turn right here. I'm going to go ahead and pull a card for attrition, see if anything bad happens. Yep, I'm glad I did not do that. So I was going to get hit regardless for 1 damage. It's a tad unfortunate I couldn't pull off the damage that I wanted to, but it's going to be a big time attack on the next round, although time is slipping here and I really need to put some damage on, but the monster's doing a good job of reacting to my every move so far and really messing me up in terms of my strategy. So what I'm going to do now is stop at this point. I've got 3 cards in hand. You'll see I also had the stamina token from the last time around. I gained an additional stamina token right now, and I didn't have any cards in my sequence. I took the damage that I was supposed to. So we're going to go ahead right now and give myself another stamina token. See, I'm setting myself up for a big time thing on the next round. And we're going to go ahead and refill my hand. Also, I have a red card in hand that allows me to do something really cool. Based on the number of blue cards in my discard pile, I can add additional damage. So I'm hoping to see lots of blue here. Didn't happen, but I still have 4 in my discard pile, which is going to add up to a lot of damage. I'm going to be going after a huge attack in the next round. Darian still has the aggro token, and because of this, the monster's going to turn and face him. That's going to conclude Darian's turn. We're moving over to Myra. I really need to get more damage on this thing. Now, the benefit for Myra in this situation is that Darian, with the aggro token, forced the monster to turn towards him, meaning that Myra is no longer in the tail section of the monster to start her turn, meaning that behavior card doesn't trigger like it was going to originally. Again, this is the kind of stuff you can toy around with the monster in order to ensure you don't trigger things that are going to hurt you. So let's go ahead and move Myra into an advantageous position. There's really 2 of them. One is I can move into here to take advantage of the +1 from the plant, or I can actually move her to the rear section. And the interesting thing with this is if I do a rear attack on this creature, I'm going to be able to put a counter on the objective card, giving me an extra 5 damage. And I think I'd rather do that. That's going to push us up over the hump to likely get past that first phase of the monster. And that's something we need to do as soon as possible. So we'll go ahead right now, and this is going to be a little bit rough because I don't have many cards in hand for Myra to stop any attrition damage at the end of her turn, so she's likely going to take some pain, but 1 damage isn't too bad. We're also not going to be triggering any AI behavior with these upcoming sequence plays, so that's good. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to discard this card right here, and that will allow her to move. So she's going to move from her current position behind the monster. Next up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to play 4 stamina. So we're discarding these 2 cards right here for a total of 3 stamina. Plus, we're adding to it a token that we have on her, discarding this for a total of 4. That's going to allow us to do Heavy Shot. This is a card I've wanted to do for quite a while, and you have to pay the 1 plus 3 extra to get 5 additional damage on your attack. So 5 on top of the weapons damage of the Great Bow, which is already at 2. So we're up to 7. And of course, we have the attack benefit from the objective hitting in the back as well, triggering, plus the ability to do a volley 2 off the Great Bow. Based on playing this card, we immediately also move the aggro token from Darian over to Myra now. We've gone ahead and placed 7 additional damage from this massive hit of the heavy shot, so we're up to a total of 17 damage. We need 18 to get past this first card and move into the second one. We also are going to be able to place a counter right now as we went ahead and made an attack from the rear section on this card. The reaction on that card immediately states to put an additional 5 damage on, and the good news is additional damage above and beyond the actual card you're trying to clear, in this case the first one, gets to stay on there even when you move over the 18. So there's another 5 on top of it. At this point we need to change up where we're currently at in the stages. And just so there's no confusion, these are considered stance cards, these are considered peril cards, and once you go past the stance card to the next one, you then will also change up the peril card and go down to the next level as well. So you can see here, we've got a totally new stance. Now anything from the front of the monster is not an option. We're trying to hit it from the rear or the flanking sides. We also have a when revealed effect. It says that 2 struggle tokens get placed on this monster. At this point in time, that is going to cause us some pain. We'll deal with that in a second. And then this one here says when a behavior card with the Firestorm trait is triggered, which means if we go ahead and we pull a behavior card and it has the Firestorm keyword at the very top, then we're immediately placing fire on the terrain in the front sector. So fire is going to become a much more commonplace environmental effect as we go forward. Now we already put the 5 damage on for the objective card, so I've gone ahead and removed it. It's a one-time hit, and that thing is out of here. There may be additional objectives for other monsters you fight. With this one in the prologue, there's just 1. Now we need to resolve the fact that we've gone over the HP limit for this stance by taking away the number of damage that equals to that first stance, which is 18. Damage has all been cleared up. We had 4 overflow, which we get to keep. The next stance, which is this one right here, requires 24, as it states in the top left-hand corner. We already have 4 for this stance, so we only need 20 more. Next up, we're going to go ahead as the when revealed effect triggers. We're going to try to add 2 struggle tokens. We cannot do that because we don't have any left in the prototype, and also, anytime we're putting them on beyond 10, we are going to trigger some bad news. All the struggle tokens have been removed. The unleash ability is now triggered, and if it's not specified what it actually does for the monster on any given card or gameplay element, then it essentially just takes the attrition damage stated on the current stance card, which in this case didn't increase when we went to 2. It's currently at 1, and that damage is going to be placed on both characters. We're going to end off Myra's turn at this point, and she's gone ahead and discarded her sequence. We've also got 1 card in hand, so we don't, I think for the first time in the game with Myra, don't get an extra stamina token, which is unfortunate, but we get to drop some cards for her. Alright, we're back to playing cards into our sequence, but there's a couple things I need to make mention of that are big time misses on my part. First off, I moved Myra at the beginning of her turn to here. This threat token shouldn't be here. No gameplay impact yet because I haven't done my attrition pull yet. The next thing I want to mention is I missed at the beginning of my turn taking advantage of drawing 2 additional cards. Because we haven't drawn any other cards off the top, I'm definitely going to do that right now. These are going to go into my hand as they should have been there from the start of my turn. And then we're going to do this volley 2 off of the Great Bow thanks to placing this in my sequence, so we'll be all squared away. 2 cards going into the hand. We have Fighting Edge. We'll place that in hand. And another card here we have called Shot. Now let's go ahead and do a volley. We're going to pull 2 cards off the top. We're hoping to see red. That will inflict extra damage. Here we go. That is no good. And the next one, too bad. Did not pan out. I'm going to be a bit bold here and push for extra damage, so I'm going to spend both of these cards by discarding them for a stamina each, and we're going to go ahead and play Aimed Shot. And the bonus to this is we are playing another attack card. I don't get the benefit of the ability on it, but the attack will be 2 damage, plus I get the ability to do the volley afterwards, which isn't so bad. I'm able to make that attack from the back without triggering anything else nasty behavior-wise. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the volley. I've already placed the damage from my attack up top. The volley's going to allow me to draw 2 cards and see if I get any reds. First one, no, come on, give me one of them. Oh, it did not work out. Moving into the end of turn, I've discarded all my cards in my sequence. I didn't have 2+ cards in my hand, so I don't get a stamina token. I get to refill my hand, but as you can see, I only have 1 card, so I'm going to have to go ahead and shuffle my deck, and there is a negative to this. If the deck is empty, I suffer damage equal to the weapon level of my current weapon and reshuffle. So as of right now, I'd take 1 damage to get my deck back up. So this is the 1 card that I need to reveal. So we got Long Range as the first card, a fresh deck, we've got Promptness, we have Quick Shot, we have Repositioning, and finally we have Long Range. I also am going to add that 1 damage for replenishing my deck, and if you haven't noticed, I have a mastery for Myra. It's hiding way over on the right hand side, and it all comes down to when she replenishes her deck. As you can see on the card way up here, it says Burst. When you draw the last card on your deck, place a counter on this card. And we only need 1 counter in order to flip it. So she's now completed her mastery, which was burning out her entire deck. Flipping it to the opposite side, that start volley 2, what that means is at the start of every turn for Myra, she's going to be able to pull 2 cards off the top of her deck, place them in her discard to see whether she inflicts damage from her bow. So basically, she's going to be shooting arrows more often, which is awesome. And if we can aim to burn through this deck another time, we're going to be able to inflict 6 more damage. Speaking of damage, we have an attrition check to do at the end here, so this is likely going to be painful as I have no defense whatsoever. Yep, so I'm going to be taking 1 damage from attrition. Myra is certainly getting up there with the damage, currently at 6. She only has the availability to take up to 8, but I have this potion and I'm certainly going to be trying to pull that off for 4 healing in the future if I can ensure on the top of the discard pile for attrition there's at least a 1. We've made it to the end of another round, so at this point in time the fire is going to be reduced. That's sitting way back here, so no more fire on the table, which is a plus. And we're moving into round number 5 right now. The tracker has moved down, and this is where we're going to stop for part number 1. Join me as we continue this in the finale video of this prologue playthrough to see whether or not Darian and Myra are going to be able to take down this beast. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next episode, and as always, keep on rolling solo.